Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast, a podcast dedicated to the greatest rugby team that has ever existed, a fact reinforced by the Blue and Blacks win over Leinster on Friday. We'll be discussing that victory at the Arms Park, covering all the latest news and taking our first proper look ahead to the 2026-27 squad. Joining me on the podcast this week, got Steve Coombs. Steve, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Dan.
Good stuff. And Andrew Fordey, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate.
All good, right? We shall get to Friday then. Cardiff 8, Leinster 7, a high-scoring thriller. It was in a torrential downpour that the Blue and Black started quite well. And after a Charlie Tector yellow card in the first half, Callum Sheedy opened the scoring off the tee. It stayed 3-0 until midway through the second half when Cam Winnett triggered a counter-attack down the left. Mason Grady made good ground, and then Dan Thomas linked for Aled Davis to score. A late Jacob Beetham yellow card led to Luke McGrath's try with Tech converting to make it a nervy finish, but Cardiff clung on for a 1 point victory to go third in the URC after other results went our way. Three-word thoughts. Gareth said Cardiff out Munster Leinster. Ryan said proper gritty bastards. Rob went with physically dominant Cardiff. Olivia said it was a well-deserved win. Sean, with some clever use of apostrophes, said Rico's Harry's doormat. Lloyd said Beetham catches victory. Reese went with Mulder tackle incredible, and Liam summed it up with we are massive. Steve, coming to you first. What are your thoughts on the game?
I keep reading people saying it was a bad game. I thought it was terrific. I thought it was a fantastic game of rugby. Um, and it kind of went how I expected to. I was very confident that we'd win the game, particularly when I saw the Met Office forecast, because we were set up very well for a wet weather game. Lots of good kickers in the back line, big wingers, good chasers. And the thing with Leinster is they will, I think, probably particularly in the international periods, is they'll try to strangle teams just by keeping the ball. And in those conditions, it was always going to be difficult for them to do that to us. So, yeah, a little disappointed that we didn't nil them because I think that there's a world where, we do nil Leinster. I think if, maybe if Jacob Beetham is a quarter of a second earlier and he runs in the interception try and we win 15-0 and we'd all be pretty delighted with that, wouldn't we? But no, feels like a statement win at this time of the season. So yeah, lots to be chuffed about.
Fordey, your thoughts?
Yeah, just absolutely buzzing. Like, I think it was a hell of a graft for 80 minutes from 1 to 15. I think they kind of turned up for a game where it must not have been a nice game to play in at all. Like, I feel like I'm still drying off. Um, the North Terrace gets a lot of criticism, and I think it's justified when you're not really undercover when you're at the Arms Park. But yeah, it was just delighted to get the win. It's a bit of a cliche, I say it all the time, but wouldn't have won games like that in seasons gone by. So yeah, pretty buzzing to get that win.
Yeah, I was less confident than Steve going into it, I have to say. But I wasn't like unconfident, just wasn't really sure what to make of Friday. But from that sort of early passage of play where they got the yellow card and we were kicking quite well and competing quite well in the air, I never felt like we were going to lose that. Even when they scored the try and went to the yellow card, I didn't think that they were particularly playing well. I think there's been a lot of chat about this not being a vintage Leinster side, but they had gone on a good run. They'd gone 10 from 10. I think we obviously had them rattled though in that first half. They had to bring the big guns off the bench quite early, just before half time there. And even then, they didn't, they won that scrum penalty, which I think there was a large question mark around the awarding of that scrum penalty anyway. But they didn't have a huge impact on the game. I didn't think we kept the likes of Schneemann quiet for majority of that second half, and we just looked like a team that knew exactly how we were going to win the game, which is something that, yeah, like it's exactly right, Fordy. We wouldn't have won that before, but I don't think we even would have known how to win it before. Like we wouldn't have had any idea about how to kick sensibly there and how to marshal backfield as well as we have done this season. That little tactical tweak of dropping whoever the open side is. Obviously, it's tended to be Dan Thomas a fair bit in recent weeks. Back into the backfield on kick reception makes such a huge difference to have him there. Just to, if the ball's a bit scrappy, he cleans it up. If the guy who receives the kick is under pressure at the breakdown, you've got a back row forward there to get over him. It is a huge tick in the box for us, and I'm surprised other teams haven't sort of clocked onto that a bit more. To be honest, you see number eight's drop back there, but not that's usually for kick reception and returns. It's not for doing the scrappy work, which I think is why we've dropped the open side back into the backfield. So yeah, it was very controlled. I think Ali Davis, not great passing wise, tough night to be a passing nine, I guess, but I think he justifies that experienced nine role, having somebody who can kick like that because Fintan Gunn, there's been a lot written about him, I think, as a young Leinster nine. And he's obviously got something about him, but that he will learn a lot, I'm sure, on Friday night about how to manage those conditions. And yeah, there was just it was probably the most comfortable 1 point win I've seen in quite a long time. Steve, was it that you said it was a statement win? Was it the best win of the season so far for Cardiff in some respects?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that, and I think it probably is. Um, it's we still haven't seen what you might call a complete performance from Cardiff this season, but in terms of, let's say, if we measure it in terms of progression from 2 seasons ago, I thought the last 5 minutes of that game on Friday we were outstanding. I think that's if you want to show someone like a classic example of how to close a game out, the last 5 minutes from Cardiff, I think was basically perfect. Um, and we weren't doing that 2 years ago. We were cocking it up in the last 5 minutes of games pretty regularly. So if, 2 years ago we were saying, well, when these like 1 or 2 point losses start coming our way, um, we'll be doing very well. And I think that Friday night performance is a classic example of us learning how to close out those games. So it, I'm not going to call it like the greatest performance of the season because the greatest performances are yet to come, but I think it feels like a bit of a watershed because we've achieved what we needed to 2 years ago. We've learned how to close out games, and we've done it against Leinster, and you can't complain about that game.
A couple of other three-word thoughts. Blindside went with big D energy. Ben said discipline was outstanding. Sean said huge defensive sets. Gareth said defense, resilience, grit. Robert went with defense wins games, and Alex went with amddiffyn and ennill, which Google Translate tells me is like defense is wins, basically. The stats were 162 tackles at 86% for Cardiff. We could restricted Leinster to 5 line breaks, 422 entries. Obviously, only the one try. We've won 8 turnovers and only conceded 3 penalties in 80 minutes. Fordey, obviously, a huge defensive shift, which brings me to the point of somebody we perhaps don't mention too much on the pod. Do we give Gethin enough credit for the work he's done with this defense?
Yeah, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Like, the stats you're rolling off the tongue there are quite remarkable just in any general game, never mind against Leinster. I think as well in the first half, they didn't have a 22-meter entry at any point either, which is pretty phenomenal defense. I know obviously the conditions mean it's a completely different style of game, but that's still pretty incredible. And we all want a team who plays exciting rugby, but I think to have that foundation of a solid defense that kind of Gethin Jenkins has put into place, I'd happily take a boring win over some flashy, exciting rugby where we lose. And I agree with what Steve said that but the first half was probably boring a bit on Friday, but I think it was a good game in terms of it was a good spectacle, and it was exciting. But yeah, no, I agree that Gethin probably doesn't get the credit he deserves. I'm sure he was smiling after that game on Friday because that kind of had him written all over it. Really, that performance.
I
I
think
did. Sorry, go
sorry.
on, Steve.
The other thing to give Jenkins credit for is the kicking strategy. Because if you think back to the start of the season when Sherritt left and they talked about how they were dividing up the new coaching responsibilities, Gethin was made responsible for that. And a lot of that win is the kicking strategy, isn't it? So I think a lot of the way, not to take anything away from Corey Banzi, but a lot of the way we're playing at the moment, I think a fair bit of credit probably has to go to Gethin Jenkins.
Absolutely. And on Fordey's point about him smiling, I did post that I thought he'd be smiling, and then somebody replied with S4C had done a close up of him in the huddle, and he still looked fuming about something. I don't know what it was. I assume he was just thinking about the one try they conceded, and he's going to bring that up with somebody on Monday's meeting. But yeah, maybe at some point there was a slight wry smile in the coach's box in that second half. I'm sure. Steve, not to be too negative after a good win over Leinster, but I suppose you can frame it in a positive way of should we have won by more by taking a few more points when there was probably three kickable penalties I think that we turned down during the game in conditions like that, or do we just sort of say in that weather we just got out with the win and that was fine?
Um, Probably. I think you can see what they're thinking. They're probably thinking of getting the psychological boost of getting a try from a maul or something early on. But yeah, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, you'd prefer just to take the points. But then I think generally over the past few games, we do seem to have learned our lesson there, and we're going for the post more often. Um, but yeah, I can see why we turned down those opportunities, but it would have been nice to get a more comfortable win. But no, I think you still got to remain a little bit daring even in those conditions and go for a try early on.
It would have been easier if I'm not too sure what happened to Liam Belcher's throw in on Friday. It certainly wasn't of top quality that we would expect from him. It's got to the point now where people are so frustrated on the South Terrace, like close to the tunnel where Tent stand, that Lee Halfpenny is now taking abuse for not running on quick enough with the tee to even give them the decision. It's all his fault now. A few other three-word thoughts. Ryan said fantastic game management. Richard said it was a very Irish closeout. Joe said a great final effort. Fordey. I mean, do we even get nervous about closing out games now? Because this is like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There was the Connacht game at home, the Edinburgh game as well. Benetton, we closed that out quite well. Are we just a team that does that now?
I think there'll always be like an element of nerves. I was a little bit sketchy after Leinster scored their try because it's still about 12 minutes to go. But then I think kind of as time passed, I got a lot more confident, which, yeah, I think in times gone by, that never would have been the case. Um, our game management, I think, towards the end of the games, it was Munster game last year as well, I think, was a pretty, we kind of closed the game off quite well in that one as well. And I was a little bit nervous, but yeah, the game management's kind of phenomenal. Like, and with at the end of that game on Friday, being in the North Terrace, kind of everything that was going on was on the far side. So you couldn't really see exactly what was going on from where I was. So there was always that slight worry of, is there sealing off going on? Because I've been stung by that many a time from a Cardiff or Wales point of view as they're closing a game up. But no, they're pretty much there's a lot more confidence, I think, from a Cardiff perspective when it comes to closing games out. I just don't want to be too confident in case it comes back to bite us. Someone will like clip this up of me saying how unnervous I am, and then a game will come about. So hopefully, touch wood. Long may it continue.
I mean, we're so confident now that we're even doing it with 14 men just for fun, with Jacob Beetham, who had a 15-minute yellow card in the end because we were like, no, you don't come after back on, mate. You just stay over there. We'll sort it out. That's fine. Um, Individually, I think there's probably quite a long list of players we could mention, Steve. But who's at the top of that list for you after Friday?
I mean, it's easy to talk about the forwards, but I thought the whole back three were outstanding. I thought Mason Grady really stepped up. The ball was slippery, so there were a few spills, but when he had the opportunity, he made his presence felt. I thought Jacob Beetham was really slick in everything he did on the wing. I mean, like I say, I mean, yes, he got the card, but a quarter of a second earlier, he's under the post. I thought Cameron it was very good, and I think the back three was as important to the win as the pack. I don't think you can pick any individual out in the pack. They were all outstanding. I mean, Josh McNally was excellent, but then it's easy to it's easy to overlook his performances because he's so consistently good.
Fordey, I don't know if there's anyone else you want to name check.
No, I pretty much agree. I think it's what was quite intriguing to me is that granted it wasn't a game for someone like Tom Bowen, but that you kind of have that electric X factor that your back three is doing so well that you don't need to bring on someone with that X factor in Tom Bowen. I thought that was the one thing that kind of I clocked at full time of that seeing Tom Bowen on the bench. I know obviously he's played a lot under 20s recently, but you think he would have been perfect for if we were chasing a game or even to close a game out. Yeah, granted, like I said, not the weather for him, but the fact that we can leave an X Factor player like him off just shows quite how much of a shift those backline players put in. Granted, Beetham was off, so that kind of changes things a little bit, but still is yeah, I thought it was just superb performance all around.
On Grady, Steve, Rob sent a question in just before we start recording, just about do we need to get him involved more? And I think there was a little bit of frustration from where we were on the South Terrace that there were some attacking sets in that first half in particular where we were in and around their 22, and that Grady was the one providing the width right out on the other wing. I don't necessarily think that's him who's taken that on. I think that's probably what the winger is coached to do there in our system. But do we perhaps, particularly on a night like Friday with that weather, need to think of maybe Millard could be that guy, or maybe put the fullback out there to get the bulk of Grady into midfield a bit more with ball in hand?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think there has to be some scope for having a plan B. And if sometimes when your attacking system isn't working, you need perhaps need to get a bit back to basics a bit. And having someone like Mason, I don't think he should play 12, but having someone like Mason Grady standing at 12 or maybe even at first receiver, it's kind of difficult to go wrong. Even if occasionally it's as a decoy. So I'd quite welcome seeing us mix it up in that way. Um, but I think more generally, perhaps it's just that he needs to play himself, keep playing himself into form because he's missed a lot of games. So it might just be something that comes with time. But yeah, I'd certainly welcome the odd occasion where Mason Grady stood at 12.
There was a nice little attacking moment in the second half where we did have the opportunity to move a bit wide and Mason come off the left wing round to the right, and there was a little tip on from Ben Thomas that got Mason and then Jacob Beetham into space, and you just kind of thought, yeah, that's where you want him, just coming off Ben Thomas or Callum Sheedy's shoulder in midfield, and yeah, he's obviously then got the option of going on that wider curve run if he needs to because he's unbelievably quick for a big bloke, and then he can straighten it up and just hit somebody because he's unbelievably big for a big bloke as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And also he can just be a magnet for defenders, can't
yeah.
he? Because the defending team knows that if you miss one tackle on him and let him get into space, you're gonna have a hell of a job getting him down.
The play I just wanted to highlight as well, stand out as like yeah, the whole pack was brilliant, but I just think like it shouldn't ever be overlooked that Reece Barrett is still incredibly young for a loose head prop, and it was only this time last year he was sort of taking his first steps into first team rugby, and now we're at a position where he's still what 23, 24, somewhere around there, and I don't think many would argue at the moment that he's first choice loose head for us now, which considering Domo has been really good for us, and when he's fully fit is still international quality, and Danny Southworth was in the Wales squad in the autumn. That for Barrett to jump ahead of both of them at the moment is excellent. His scrummaging on the whole was excellent. And I thought what was particularly impressive was he does concede that penalty, which I still think Slimani stands up quite quickly on that one before half time. But coming out in the second half, then the adjustment made, and we got back to some level of scrum parity before he departed. Was mature beyond his years, I think is fair to say his performance there. So Cardiff now sitting third on 40 points. We've got Stormers and Ulster just behind us with a game in hand, which if they were to win them would, depending on sort of points difference and bonus points, would probably jump them above us. The general consensus is you sort of need 48 to 50 points to make the playoffs, although whether, as we saw again this weekend, the fact that sort of anybody's beaten anybody in URC this season has lowers that total somewhat. But Fordey, we've kept talking about what we need to make the playoffs and stuff, and kept saying we got difficult fixtures to come, but we keep ticking them off, getting some points like beating Benetton, beating Leinster. Like, at what point do we start looking up rather than down?
I'll be honest, on Saturday after seeing Stormers and Ulster lose, I know they've got a game in hand. I was properly thinking, oh, top four's a possibility here. And I know Harley mentioned it on the pod last week of a home quarter final is definitely on the cards. But yeah, I mean, why not? We might as well dream about it because I think as much as personally I do enjoy an away day, I think the idea of like a URC quarter final at Cardiff Arms Park in hopefully the sunshine it would just be absolutely bouncing there. It'd be a hell of an occasion. So yeah, no, I'm certainly after the weekend's results, I'm looking at the moment.
That South Africa trip is going to be the interesting one, isn't it? So
Yeah.
that's always on the horizon. Um, Steve, just on Friday as well, I wanted to ask, as somebody who's probably watched quite a lot of rugby at the Arms Park pre-artificial pitch in what can only be described as swamp conditions, was there a part of you that any part of you that wanted a throwback of seeing that again, or are we absolutely thankful for an artificial pitch at this point?
It's funny you asked that because the like the try we scored on Friday night was very similar to a try I remember scoring in like 1988, 1989 when obviously I was very young at the time, but right so uh there was a try scored by a winger called Damien Griffiths against the Scarlets, which again sort of closed out a win against them, which is always welcome. And like the players streaking down the opposite touchline, handling in the wet. But of course, the big difference is it's no longer muddy. Um, I don't really miss the mud, to be honest. I think the fact that you can bring the crowd onto the pitch at the end of the game and use the Arms Park through the week is a massive bonus. Um, yeah, I think the setup of the Alms Park at the moment is terrific, and historically it always flooded. Historically, it always got very muddy this time of year, and you know, does do we want every rugby ground to be like the Brewery Field? Probably not.
There was an English Championship match on, I forget what platform they live stream their games on, but there was one of them on Friday. I think it was Nottingham was the home team, and within 5 minutes you couldn't tell which team was which. It was that level of muddy, and so I think that absolutely would have been repeated at the Arms Park because particularly for that sort of 10 minutes before half time, that rain was unreal levels of rain there. One thing it does mean is that you can still do halftime entertainment for. I don't know if did you see the kids running back and forth? Just how disappointed were you that they didn't have to dive headfirst through the circular tackle bag thing this time?
Yeah, I was very disappointed because I can't remember what game it was. Was it the Ulster game
I think it
in
might have been Ulster, yeah.
Europe? Yeah, the two boys I was watching the game with on Friday, they weren't at that game. So as soon as I saw the assault course got set up, I was properly like bigging it up to them, going, "This is great fun," and then having to explain to them how, oh no, it's not as good as it was last time because you don't have the larger kids jumping through those rings. So yeah, disappointed because I got so excited as soon as I saw it, especially with the rain. I wasn't really desperate to move from where I was because you were just jam packed in the terrace. So yeah, bit of a disappointing halftime entertainment that compared to before.
Yeah, the health and safety officer was chuffed, I'm sure, because they were definitely watching that first go of it. But yeah, I was even picking out kids I was looking forward to seeing dive through the hoop head first as they were running out. But no, not to be, unfortunately. Any more from Friday's game? No, all good. My only extra point was I thought it was great to see I got in position dead early because of how wet it was. I wasn't hanging around outside the clubhouse or anything. But two travelling reserves on Friday, Tom Howe and Sonny McCabe, both of this season under 18s. Obviously, uh, Sonny's played quite a lot for the Rags over the last few weeks, and Tom Howe has been playing for Wales under 20s as well. But great experience for them to warm up, and I think they were involved in training on Thursday as well with the first team. There was just a moment where they sort of do a kind of defensive drill not long before running in, and looked up and Josh McNally was just stood next to Sonny McCabe talking him through the drill and what was happening. You just think that's invaluable for somebody of 18 stepping up as a young second row to be able to have Josh McNally talk you through bits and pieces. So great experience for them, and we'll discuss next season squad towards the end of the pod. But
Tom Howe looks absolutely unreal already,
he
doesn't he?
does, doesn't he? Yeah.
I can't believe how well he's been playing for Wales in the 20s. It shouldn't be that someone that young is looking so good.
Yeah, one of my questions is whether we see more of him next year, so we shall discuss that in the hooker section later. Moving on then to some news. There's three pieces of main news which I shall ask for some thoughts on in a minute. So the first is Azarati has been recalled to the Wales squad after returning to fitness and coming off the bench for us on Friday. He obviously was in the initial Six Nations squad, but then withdrew due to a calf problem, which he's overcome. Uh, Cornell Schmidt has officially departed. His short-term deal came to an end. He heads back to South Africa after making four appearances in all competitions after signing during the Autumn International. I think he was announced and arrived at the club. And then after last week, we mentioned that Cornel van Zyl was linked to the Benetton job. That particular opening is now shut with the news that Wayne Pivac is going to take over there at the end of the season when Callum McRae departs. Fordey, I don't know if any of those particularly stick out to you. Any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I'm kind of happy that Van Zyl is staying. I think it's a positive, particularly after his comments last week of that he'd been in contact with Benetton. Um, Quite just off topic, but intrigued to see how Wayne Pivac will go at Benetton next season. But yeah, with regards to Cornell Smith, obviously didn't see a huge amount of him, but going to miss those tackles he made against Racing because they were huge.
Steve, anything jump out to you? And I suppose on Van Zyl, is he somebody you would look to retain at Cardiff if looking ahead as a head coaching, or are you sort of more in the position of there might be other options out there?
I mean, I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's going pretty well, so why would you make a change at head coach? We clearly would need to recruit an attack coach for next season, but I don't. I think it would be a mistake to then put someone above Van Zyl because unless something absolutely horrendous happens between now and May. I think things are going very well, so I don't see the reason to try looking for a more well-known head coach. I think we've already got a good one.
Rob did send a question in asking, like, should we have let Schmidt go before the South Africa tour? Which I think there probably is something in that it would have been ideal to keep him. I wonder whether money probably suggests that we can't do that, as we're obviously still quite tightly restricted budget wise, or maybe B, if he has picked up a knock or something. 'Cause I thought maybe it was slightly odd that he wasn't involved at all, even as like a travelling reserve or anything on Friday. He was just there in street clothes at the game. So. If he has picked up a knock, then it may not be too ideal to keep him either.
I mean, the other thing is, I mean, when he came in, I think Grady was injured, Elijah Evans was
Yeah,
injured, um, Rory Jennings, because he can cover 12, can't he? And Rory Jennings was still injured. All those players are now back. Oshin Darwin Lewis has been playing well for the under 20s, and he might start coming into it latter half of the season. So maybe we just have less need of the cover there.
yeah, it could certainly be seen as a sort of a confidence boost for the younger lads as well to say that we're going to trust you as our backups over bringing somebody in. That's absolutely true. Obviously, we are going to miss his brains though. Pub quiz team Cardiff Rugby is taking a dive there, so we will have to look for somebody with equal qualifications to come in next season to really bolster that encyclopedia corner in the changing room. The final piece of news then is just some sad news to report that former Cardiff winger Ray Glastonbury passed away recently, born in Caerphilly. Attended Whitchurch Grammar School and played for Cardiff schools and youth before making his first team debut, a try-scoring debut against Bridgend in September 1959. Despite interruptions from national service, he went on to score 24 tries in 51 games over the next three seasons. Before, after leaving the RAF, he headed north to turn professional with Workington Town, where he set a record for the most tries scored by a Union convert in their debut season that still stands today. our thoughts are with his family and friends at this sad time. It's Ray Glastonbury, who passed away recently, aged 87. A quick Rags corner then. No action last weekend for Dan Fisher's men as the SRC Cup semi-finals carried on with. They are back in SRC proper league action this weekend though with the rearranged Aberavon fixture. That's a 2:30 kickoff at the Talbot Athletic Ground on Saturday afternoon. The Rags are currently third, 20 points off Ebbw in first, but any points that they get on Saturday will push them above Llandovery into second. A bit of player news for them. Stefan Crimp has departed. He's gone back to America where he signed for the California Legion of MLR, which is a new team made up of the merger of the San Diego Legion, who he previously played for, and the Los Angeles Rugby Club. So this season will be starting soon. He is a Cardiff boy, but he is American qualified, so I suggest there's probably an aim to play in the 2027 Rugby World Cup there for him. And if you can't make it to Aberavon on Saturday, but you want some rugby action, the SRC Cup and Plate finals being held at the Arms Park. It's 2:30 is the Plate, RGC against Swansea, and 5:30 is the Cup, Llandovery against Newport. So very best of luck to RGC and Llandovery there. No, don't want to see any of Swansea and Newport winning them. But I think it's a couple of quid to get in, and it's not on telly because S4C does not care about the SRC Cup or Plate as they've proven over the last few weeks. At this point of the pod, then, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. If you're watching us on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel of Rap, where all the Welsh stuff's going out, and the Global Gain Line, the sister channel, where plenty of podcasts appearing from around the world, men's and women's game. We've also got a shop, a rap shop with some stuff on it, which you can buy. There's a link on the YouTube, or I'll put it in our social media. We've got a link thing in the bio, but not one of those ones, sort of more PG version with links to our YouTube. So feel free to have a look on there if you want to buy anything. I've no idea where the money goes. It doesn't come to me, so feel like don't worry about that. It's not going into our pocket. But we shall move on at this point to the last part of the pod. So I felt like it's finally time, even though we have absolutely no certainty on what's happening in Welsh rugby at the moment, to start looking ahead to the 26-27 season, because if we don't start now, then we'll just sort of give up and turn up again in September and see what really we're picking up the pieces of. I put out a graphic on our social media over the last couple of days. Was let down badly by the proofreaders as I managed to put two players in there twice. But basically, the idea of the exercise is not to sort of go deep into who is and who isn't contracted, and really there's no like additional stuff in terms of player rumors, sign-ins, or anything like that. It's more just a kind of high-level aspirational look at the players who are currently contracted, who we know, or rather who we don't know of definitely leaving. So, for example, Ben Donnell isn't on there. Neither of the two Bath Loney lads are on there, as we assume they go back to Bath this summer as well. But we'll just go through position by position, read out who is currently contracted in the first team in the senior academy, and have a quick discussion on whether we'd like to, if a player was going to move on, or whether it's a position we'd like to strengthen, as well as whether the young players are ready to step up. So we shall start with Loosehead, where currently we've got Corey Domachowski, Rhys Barrett, Danny Southworth, and sort of the essence of Ed Byrne. Whether he's actually there in person or not remains to be seen. And then in the senior academy, Cam Tyler Grocott and Dylan Barrett are playing their trade. Cam mostly playing for the Rags, and Dylan's mostly played for Cardiff Met this season. Steve, let me flick to my listener questions. We did have an opinion from Craig on Reddit who said he reckons we can afford to live without Domachowski next season. Dom, who's been linked to the Scarlets on Wales Online last week. There's also a few comments on young Johan Emmanuel, whether if it was possible to retain him or not, whether that might be something we do. What would you like to see at a Loosehead? Would you keep Doma? Would we let Byrne go and replace him maybe?
I mean, you would. I personally would love to see Ed Byrne play for us, just to see what he's like. I mean, I'm sure he's made. I mean, I think he was signed as much as anything to make an impact off the field as an experienced head, and I'm sure he's done that role very well. But it would be nice to see him have a couple of run-outs for the end of the season. But you'd have to say he's likely to move on, probably. I think with Doma, I think we'd want to keep him because I think it's great to have three really solid senior loose heads. But I think he probably has slipped down the pecking order. I think Reece Barrett is our best loose head. Danny Southworth has been reliably good. So I would be perhaps not too disappointed if he did move on to a club where he could play first team rugby a bit more often. Um, but we certainly don't need to go out and like buy an expensive new loose head. And on the other part of that question, yeah, I'd love it if we could keep Johan Emmanuel because I think he's going to be a player.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Dom. And I'm not suggesting for him money is the main driver at all, but it probably is the case that other teams like the Scarlets, for example, if somebody like Hepburn were to move on and they were looking for Welsh qualified, would see him as maybe more valuable to them than Cardiff would to us at this moment in time. Because you've got to think if we're offering him a contract, it's at this point more. It's certainly not the first choice contract that we might have offered him a few years ago, where he was at the top of that pecking order. Now it's more a squad rotation player type contract that I think we'd be looking to offer him. Whereas, yeah, the Scarlets or one of the other sides might say you're definitely going to be first or second choice for us. So here's a bit more of a contract that reflects that. But I think just from the young guy's point of view, I wouldn't suggest Tyler Grocott is ready to step up yet. I think he probably needs another. He's had a few injuries which haven't helped, but I think he probably needs another SRC campaign with the Rags. And maybe at the end of next year, you might start thinking about if he's step up. So we certainly need somebody to go in
What
alongside.
about would there be scope for keeping Joe Cowell as a loose head? Because I know he's been a tight head, but he seems to be moving back towards the loose, so maybe his future's back there. If he
Yeah,
remains.
that's one I think that somebody at the club needs to probably come out and say what exactly the plan is with Cowell because yeah, we seem to be putting him in as a tight head and he was tight head cover away at Ulster, but he's gone on loan to Bedford and Northampton uh, this season, and they've both used him as a loose head, and he played mostly at loose head for Cardiff Met, and then one season a tight head for them. Maybe they're happy that he's proficient at both, and that could be an asset for us. I don't know, but yeah, that would be an interesting question to ask of like Bubba maybe or Griff Rhys, and just say what do you think the idea for him is? Because yeah, he's still, as far as I'm aware, on a senior academy contract as well. So if they were to sign him to a senior contract next year, I think it would be a pretty major statement to say, yeah, this guy is an option for us in the senior team certainly. On to hooker then, Fordey. We've got Belcher, Evan Lloyd, Dav Hughes, and then Tom Howe in the academy at the moment. Um, I think probably the main question here, and I don't know how impartial you are as the Glantaf man, of course, on the pod, but when does Howe make that step up? I think that's going to be the question that sort of dominates the rest of the under 26 nations and then probably through to the Junior World Cup as well in the summer. Could it be as soon as next season that we see him in the first team?
Yeah, I think considering the way his development has gone so far, that he's almost gone straight into the rags as soon as he's been able to, and he's started for Wales under 20s basically as soon as he's been able to. You feel naturally they'll probably be pushing for him to be involved next season with the first team. It would surprise me if there was no involvement at all, whether that's kind of regularly featuring as a travelling reserve or um, kind of leapfrogging Dav Hughes as maybe that third choice option. You do think like situations when Zebra away, when we got Max Pearson on loan from Bath, you think there'll be no need for that if you have someone like Tom Howe next season. But also in terms of his development, he's clearly a special talent. You can't just chuck an 18-year-old straight in the deep end in a position like that and expect everything to go plain sailing. I mean, it might, but it could really hinder his development going forward. But yeah, I think I'd be really surprised if there wasn't a kind of push for him to be more involved. I'm sure we'll probably see him after the under 26 nations kind of start more regularly for the Rags as well.
Yeah, somebody even mentioned whether he might end up going to South Africa in a few weeks because I think Evan Lloyd was spotted in a knee brace in town last week, which is why he wasn't involved on Friday night. And I think I don't know whether rugby-wise he'll be ready. I suspect Glantaf themselves might have a question mark over him going to South Africa for 2 weeks with his A levels on the horizon. But yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, similarly, it wouldn't surprise me if he comes back from that Junior World Cup, goes straight into pre-season training with the first team, and is there or thereabouts points next season. Um, the tight head then, Steve, Kieran Azarati, Javin Sebastian, Sam Wainwright, Will Davis King, and then I still got Joe Cowell listed there in the academy bit with Callum Donahue Proud and Harrison Rock as well. I, it seems pretty set. I guess the real question here is if Will Davis King were to depart, would we need to replace him necessarily?
I mean, I think you need to have four tight heads. Um, of the players in the academy, to be honest, I haven't seen much of them. I haven't seen much of Callum Donahue Proud. I'm not sure where has Harrison Rock been playing?
He's been at Merthyr pretty much all
Oh,
season.
really? Okay.
Yeah, but I've not seen any of him at Merthyr. I haven't heard anyone mention him at all. And yeah, similarly, I haven't seen Donahue Proud's played quite a bit. Rags and Bridgend, he's played a couple of
Hmm.
games, but I haven't seen it enough to sort of suggest he's ready or anything. I would suggest probably not, though, as still quite a young player.
Yeah. So I mean, in both those cases, it would seem like a bit of a leap for them to go straight into being fourth choice in the squad, and you do need four tight heads. I think with Will Davis King, he might be in a situation where it's in his interests to move, just to go to a club where he can play regularly, because I think he's in his late 20s now, and he's never really played regularly, has he? So it's probably in his interest to go where he will play. So adding a fourth tight head would probably make sense. But we are looking, in terms of our top three tight heads, we are looking actually pretty strong. Azarati, Will squad regular. Sebastian, I think Sebastian's probably playing well enough to be in the Scotland squad if he was still in Scotland. Um, and Wainwright is also in the Welsh squad, so it's a good group. But yeah, we need a fourth guy in there, I would say.
Yeah, especially as Simon Thomas did an interview with Sebastian last week, and as far as Sebastian's concerned, he is going to be Welsh qualified again this summer, which I think some people were confused about because he doesn't actually have a birth link to Wales, and so whether he'd be able to switch back or not, people were querying. But he himself believes that he is going to be able to play again for Wales when that 3 years is up this summer. And apparently, Steve Tandy also believes the same thing. And has been in contact. So, if we do end up in a scenario, and it's probably not far off, you only need one or two injuries really, where certainly Sebastian and Azarati end up in a Wales squad, and you could even end up with Sebastian Azarati and Wainwright all in a Wales squad. You're probably only a few injuries away from that. So, we definitely need a bit of cover there. Um, Right, if I read out this list of names is James, Steve, Charlie, Mark, Gareth, Rob, Sid, and Silent_Hawk on Reddit, all named lock as a position where we need to bolster. I think it's just like a standard Cardiff fan response. If somebody says there's a signing coming in, the first question is he a lock, yes or no? And followed by is he South African, yes or no? Fordey, we've got George Knott, Teddy Williams, Rory Thornton, Josh McNally, their senior academy of Tom Cottle and Gabe Williams. There's been rumour of Christianza coming in, although Rugby Pass did mention over the last few days that Sale are apparently interested in hijacking that move of Shunza to Cardiff. There's Sonny McCabe as well, who is set to go on to that senior academy contract next year. I suspect we'll see him play more than a few times for the Rags at the end of the season and into next year. I don't know. It's obviously a stock response to say bolster the second row, but it's quite a good group, isn't it? I think we've got at the moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've been unlucky this year with obviously Teddy getting injured so early in the season and missing almost all the season so far, and hopefully he'll be back soon. But like George Knott has stepped up really well. Rory Thornton looks like he's playing for a new contract, so I'm sure he'll still be involved going forward. And I think there's maybe question marks with Josh McNally, but again, if he's still got that appetite, then it's a really good kind of group of locks with Cottle. And if Gabe Williams is anything like his brother, then that's something really exciting to look at. But I do think there's probably kind of that 4-6 hybrid missing with Ben Donald going, and if Shunder's coming in, that kind of fits the bill a bit. But I think yeah, I think it's in Cardiff DNA to just constantly want a 130 kilo, 6'8" second row, probably from South Africa, kind of in the team. But realistically, it's unlikely to happen. But I think it's shown this season with Teddy out, who 100% Teddy and Josh McNally were starting second rows. Kind of, we never had to mention it when doing a team sheet. There was never a debate. It was always those two. And yet, with Teddy out for the season, the second row stocks have looked good. We matched up with a Leinster team that had RG Snyman in the second row and that 6'11" freak they had starting the game as well. um, so yeah, no, I think the second row stocks do look decent, but yeah, Shuns are coming in or like a 4-6 hybrid, similar to Ben Donald, would be a good addition, I think, to make it that little bit healthier.
I'd still feel a bit greedy and want another lock as well as Shuns coming in. I mean, if there's any scope for having a slightly bigger squad with a few more options there, or one or two more options, just one or two more big lads, I think that wouldn't hurt at all, and would be really useful over the course of the season. Because I think we still don't have a squad that's quite big enough to fight on two fronts. Particularly if we do end up in the Champions Cup next season. And it would probably be in our interest to have a couple more options there. But as you say, the starting second rows or first choice second rows are terrific. As good as we've had, at least as good.
There's somebody sent me a message about Thornton the other day, and there was a similar sort of question that, I keep Thornton if he still fancies it. I think there's this like Mandela effect thing that he's well older than he is, but he's only 30. And there's somebody messaging me saying they think he's
I
going to
thought he was
call it.
34,
No, I
35.
think there is this thing that he's younger than me. Yeah, there's somebody message saying that if he wants another year, I was thinking that he's nowhere near retiring. Like, he's only he actually started quite young, which maybe like skews it in people's minds and stuff. But yeah, I think if there's a contract there, I'm imagining he'll stay. Obviously, he's still doing his coaching stuff with the Rags as well, so he's worth keeping around on that front. To back row then, Steve, there's it's an interesting one at the moment with back row because obviously for a long time we've signed back rowers when we probably think we haven't necessarily needed them. And then as Friday shows, all of a sudden we're down to absolute bare bones there. So we've got at this moment in time, Alan Lawrence, James Botham, Tame Basham, Talupe Falatau, Mackenzie Martin is still technically contracted to us, although obviously on loan at the Dragons at the moment. Alex Mann, Dan Thomas, and then Lucas De La Rua and Evan Rees in the senior academy. There's obviously question marks about whether Mackenzie Martin does come back to us. He's been linked to France. There's question marks about Falatau as well, whether he goes and takes his, I think it's fair to say, well-deserved final payday somewhere else for his career. Um, Botham and Mann, Basham obviously on the edge of the Wales squad as well. They've sort of been generally involved over the last year or so. There was quite a long list of names saying we needed an eight. James on Facebook questioned whether we needed to add another fetcher at seven as well. Is Baccaro somewhere where we do need to add a few names this summer with Donald departing?
I think so, actually. I think if there's one position in the team where if you had the ability to spend a bit of money on one player, as to say like an overseas signing, that kind of thing, I think you probably would go for a number eight. Not because Alan Lawrence has played poorly, not at all, but Faletau, as you say, probably likely to head to France or Japan. I would guess. Um, Mackenzie Martin, I guess that's a whole other story. But as you say, it doesn't look. I mean, I'm not too sure what his situation is at the moment because he hasn't really been playing at the Dragons, which doesn't bode well, sadly. So I think we probably would be looking for a number eight. Um, I thought Mann and Botham were both excellent against Scotland, so I expect them to stay in the Wales camp for the duration. So we're not going to we're going to have cover for them next season. I think Basham could also step into the Wales squad, so I could see us, yeah, looking to sign a couple of back row forwards. Strangely enough, Delarue, I think you'd hope he'd step up, but his game time has been limited. And to be honest, I haven't seen that much of Evan Reece, so it's difficult to judge. But yeah, I can see us adding a few more bodies in the back row.
Yeah, on Reece, I think he's only this season he's really come into the Rags first team. I feel like he's had to fill his frame a little bit. I think he was a little bit underpowered coming out of like under 18s rugby, and he's never really had much of a sniff at age grade representative rugby. Um, but he also, I think, needs somebody who needs to embrace the fact that he is a big guy. Like he doesn't like when he carries, you don't expect him to make the gain line or anything like that. It's more of a bit more of a surprise when he does. So you just like to see him develop a bit of a nasty streak, really. He seems like quite a nice young man, which isn't a bad thing at all off the field. But you maybe just like to see a little switch change when he steps onto the field, and especially at SRC level now, it's getting to the point where you'd expect to see him if he's going to make it at 20 years old now, you'd like to think that he'd be dominating that every week from playing predominantly at eight, and I don't think that's quite been the case so far. So hopefully he does step up. But yeah, I think we are probably maybe two or three back rowers would be ideal this summer if Faletau and Big Mac were to move on, especially that. Yeah, we are just a little bit underpowered there. I think there's a couple of good lads in the under 18s this year. Alfie Prigodzic has played quite well. I think Brian Camango, though I don't know whether they're trying to turn him into a front rower or not. But there's Johan Dacey, Chris's nephew, was captain in the first part of the season as well. So interesting to see who gets a senior academy contract out of them as well and where they end up playing next season. Into the backs then. At scrum half Fordey, Craig on Reddit suggests might be a risk of losing Sean Davis with the three senior scrum halves ahead of him. I think he's done quite well for the 20s so far. Maybe the question is around Ellis Bevan's future, who's obviously not been regularly in the first team. What would you like to see happen at scrum half ideally?
It's a tricky one because I think the current stocks of the three senior players are all very good players in their own right. But you'd be kind of stunned if Alice Bevan, if he kind of stays as third choice as he pretty much is now, if he isn't trying to push for some sort of move away. And I think that would obviously play a part then with Sean Davis. I think I don't want to bang the Glantab drum again, but I think Sean Davis is a very, very promising player. Um, so I think he's maybe someone that should kind of look at getting the odd few minutes here and there next season if he can. But yeah, it's a case of again, I just looked up Ala Davis is 34 in the summer, so it's a case of what's his future plans, and then I think naturally having a non-Welsh qualified player, there's always a risk in Mulder. There's always a risk of them possibly going elsewhere, and I'm not sure if his contract is up at the end of the season as well. So if we were able to kind of hold on to all three, that would be fantastic. But I think the reality is so different. I think the kind of the strength and depth there is superb, but we'd be very lucky to kind of hold on to all three there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one that, yeah, we're just going to have to see how that one plays out. I think there's not going to be a lot that you can say to like an Ellis Bevan to be like, yeah, continue and be third choice. If another side was to come in and say, no, you're in our 23, you think he would be foolish to turn that down, really, wouldn't
Yeah,
you? Especially, I think you look at some of the other sides. There's not a huge amount of scrum half depth for some of the other teams at the moment. Obviously, Ospreys have just had to get a guy in from Leinster on a short-term loan, and then Dragons, you sort of think a similar question around Ala Davis. How long has Roddy Williams perhaps got left at that level as well? So yeah, there might be a few openings there. We might have to fight a few off. But I agree on Sean Davis. He's look. I don't think he's gathered too many headlines for the 20s so far. But I think it speaks volumes that he's played almost every minute of every game for them. They don't look to change the nine too early in any of the games, and that's just because of how well he's playing. Fly half then, Steve. I think the question at the moment is there's been the link to Jared Evans, a fly half, and I guess do we need him? It would be a question with Sheedy and Lloyd there, and then The other sort of question I think around them, obviously we've got Lloyd Sheedy as the senior guys, and then Harry Wild and Lloyd Lucas as your senior academy guys. Do we start to put Harry Wild in there a bit more? Does he need to play a bit of first team rugby now to see whether he can actually make that step up?
Yeah, I mean, mixed feelings about the Jared link because uh, loved watching him play for us, but I mean, we really don't need another outside half. Um, Sheedy's been outstanding. I think Harry Wild's a player we need to see more of. I mean, I think he's in, I mean, I think that sort of 21, 22-year-old sort of age range where you sort of hope he's going to play a bit more. He was excellent against Stade Francais when he came on. I really love the way he passes the ball. He's a beautiful passer. So maybe in South Africa we get to see a bit more of him. Would hate to lose him. Um, it looks like the Dragons are looking for an outside half. That's been reported. So I don't know whether they're looking at Johan Lloyd and saying, if it's another situation where if you come to us, we'll definitely play you at 10. You're not going to be a utility back, honest. We're going to play you at outside half, definitely. Maybe they're saying that to him, I don't know. And that would explain why Jared Evans is being linked to us. But no, we really don't need to sign an outside half. Maybe Jared Evans would come to us as an inside centre, which I think was always John Mulvihill's dream solution. But no, Jared Evans would feel like a bit of a luxury unless someone's leaving, and I hope no one's leaving.
Yeah, I do think it would be interesting to take like a wide-ranging poll of Cardiff fans and like, would you have like Jared or Sheedy if, if that was the option? I feel like just 50-50 would probably be the answer there because there's not. Obviously, we all love Jared, but I think we've grown to love Sheedy as well over the last few years. And yeah, it is that is a head scratcher, that link. I'm not too sure exactly like whether it is something in it or whether it's just agent talk and he's used his old club to try and get something out of Quins or another team. I don't know, but yeah, I'd like to see Harry Wild a lot more. I think he's at a point in the SRC now where he's probably improved all he can in that setting, and that he's a player in many respects. I think suits the professional game a bit more than he does the SRC. With the sort of there can be a little bit more time afforded to you in that 10 channel there where defenses are a little bit more organized, whereas in the SRC it's a lot more focused on just get up in the face of the 10 as soon as possible and see if you can get a turnover from that. I've split centres a little bit then for because I think in Cardiff sort of world inside centre almost links a bit more to 10 than it does to 13 in the way that we use our players. So with that in mind, then we've got Rory Jennings, Ben Thomas, and Steph Manuel in that 12 jersey, with each of them sort of being able to cover 10 as well if sort of required. I think the question here is it time to move Jennings on and fully back Steph Manuel, or do you keep Jennings around if that was an option for a bit of experience?
I think you've got to kind of give Steph Emmanuel his proper chance, and I think that probably means Jennings is off in the summer. I think he's contributed well, but I think kind of you need to almost let Steph's development kind of progress as naturally as it should. And I think even when Steph Emmanuel's played for the first team, you can just see such a kind of natural player that he takes to it as if he's been playing professional rugby for a while, and he's still 19, 20? Like he's still a young boy who's got a very bright future. And I think you'll kind of hinder his development if he's then stuck behind Rory Jennings. Um, I think, yeah, I think Ben Thomas is going to have a little bit of a tough time with Steph Emmanuel as well, because I think he's going to give a good go of trying to take that 12 shirt off him. But I think that's kind of really healthy competition. My worry then is the outside centre is kind of it's a bit of a mess with you've got Millard almost the incumbent and Van Zyl sees Grady as a winger, so you're kind of left there outside centre with does do you expect Elijah Evans to step up there, or do you just rely on Millard and then maybe slot in a Jacob Beetham or a Mason Grady when injury crisis emerges? I think that's my priority for me is to get a kind of a 13 almost in the mold of Rory Jennings of not necessarily starting, but can do a job there when needed.
Steve, I don't know if you any strong feelings on 13. I think just generally, yeah, like Ford said, it is like all over the shop, the 13 options, because you got Millard as your kind of staple guy this season. He's obviously when everyone's fit, he's your first choice. And then there's Elijah Evans, there's Bailey Cutts to mention as well, who will come into the senior academy next season. And then you've got Mason Grady, question mark over whether they still see his long-term future at 13 or not. You've got Beetham who can go there. Or do we need someone new? Obviously, Fordey says as a squad guy. Also, could we go big money there and get somebody in overseas first choice as an outside centre as well? What would your preference be?
Um, it's a funny one because, like as you set out there, there's actually a lot of options. It's just there's no clear pecking order. We have a few players who can play there. Josh Adams can also play there if we need him to. I know that's controversial for some people. And there's a couple of young options who might step up. And this this is something which might become a bit more clear towards the end of the season when we've played. We got at least another half dozen games where we might need. Uh, Perhaps Harry Millard won't play all of them, and we might get a better idea of who is able to step up. I mean, we might have a game out in South Africa where Elijah Evans plays 13, goes well, and we start thinking, well, no, we don't need another 13. We got Elijah Evans, so it might become more clear towards the end of the season. So I think possibly hold fire on that one. Um, the other the other thing that occurs to me with the centres is we've currently still got the situation where we've got the Matt Sherratt setup of you've got your second 5/8 at 12 and your footballer and then the 13. Um, it's possible a new attack coach will come in and they may have different ideas. I mean, they may want to continue with the Sherratt way of doing things, or they may have a completely different approach, and that could end up changing the way our centres look. So yeah, I think wait and see how things develop on the 13s, I reckon, or towards the end of the season.
Yeah, this is one I think where you could ask 10 different Cardiff fans and probably get 10 different answers on what people would think is the best sort of option and best way to go with it. But yeah, it's an interesting, it's the same sort of conversation we are having towards the end of last season, really, about what to do. And they sort of did nothing last season, I think was the general approach, and just sort of see how it's gone. And maybe Millard being so available is to the detriment of the long-term planning because he's just always there. But
And then I mean, possibly there's a lesson in that because I mean, we did ask this question this time last year, and probably none of us thought Harry Miller,
yeah.
but he's done it so well. So there's always the possibility of someone who's already at the club to surprise us.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think I would like to see more of Elijah Evans at 13 in the first team over the next few months towards the end of the season. But then it comes back to probably a question for a different podcast, probably on a different podcast altogether about the wide ranging part of the game. It's just sort of where do you give these youngsters the chance? Because every game is so important all of a sudden now between in the last few months of the season. But yeah, we shall see what happens there. I think the one thing to say about 13 is that there is a lot of Welsh qualified players outside of Wales who could slot into that at the moment. You could go through Max Llewellyn, there's that Zach Wimbush that gets talked about a lot, Exeter, Louis Hennessy, Bryn Bradley. There's definitely a few guys out there who could fit the
Yeah.
mold, but
Actually, think about it. I'll change the answer I just gave because if Louis Hennessy is available, I'll just absolutely get him.
yeah, Louis Hennessy's an interesting one because my hot take about the Wales squad at the moment is that continually calling him up and not playing is absolutely detrimental to his future development because he should be playing for Bath every week in the Prem Cup at the
My,
moment.
my, my
And
conspiracy theory with that is they've got him coming into Wales camp just so Matt Shea can constantly be saying, you need to be playing more often. You should probably go to a club where you're going to play a bit more rugby.
yeah, his response being, of course, I could be playing, but I'm here holding tackle bags. Right, back three then, 4D. I think fullback generally, sort of everybody has sort of the same opinion, I would imagine, of where Winnett, Beetham, and Matty Young are there. Ideally, you'd keep hold of all three and then it'll be the case of whether that actually happens or not. Who knows? I guess how you keep them all happy. But winger is the one I'm most interested in because even at the moment, we're sort of a little bit of a winger crisis of availability where Theo Cabango remains on the long-term injury list. Ewan Stevens has obviously been out a while and has picked up another knock. You've got Josh Adams away with the Wales squad. Pretty much whenever there's a national team squad, he's generally in it. And then around that, you've got Tom Bowen, Mason Grady, obviously we've utilised on the wing a lot, and then there's a couple of youngsters coming through as well. Joseph Jones, probably the headline of them, but Reece Cummings with the 20s played on the wing a couple of times as well as at full back. Craig on Reddit, his controversial opinion on this one is that it's time to let Cabango go. That we don't really need to carry another injury-prone winger, and that you might get somebody else in, which I suppose in the cutthroat world of professional rugby might be right. Feels a bit harsh though. But what would you do with wingers into next season if you could?
Well, sorry, was that for Fordey or me?
No, it wasn't Fordey, but his
Okay.
sound has dropped out.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Yes, go on.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I do think it's harsh on Cabango to kind of say that we can just get rid of him because I don't think it's been his fault that he's been getting injured in rehab and stuff like that. And it's good 2 years since he played. So I think maybe naturally it'll kind of, I wouldn't say go desperately giving him a contract because I think naturally with the way these things work out, I think we'll find out sooner or later whether this injury he has is going to spell potentially the end of his career or if he can continue. But I do think there's a worry of in terms of depth there a little bit, and I think if we still go by the logic of, I think Van Ziel's kind of supported Sherritt's thing of a big man on one wing and a small man on the other. Of how do you necessarily balance that? Because we've had quite a few occasions where I think Tom Bowen and Iwan Stevens have played a game together, which kind of goes against that. And likewise, Josh Adams and Mason Grady would kind of be traditional big guys. So it's a case of, again, if there's a different kind of attacking structure coming in, what are we looking for? But I really want to hold on to all three fullbacks, especially if you've got Beetham that can put in a shift on the wing like he did the other night. And then, yeah, I'd definitely like to hold on to Iwan Stevens if we can. I know he's had his trouble with injuries, but every time he's played, he's looked pretty good. He's never really disappointed in a Cardiff shirt. I think he's that perfect person that kind of having him around means he's unlikely to get called up for Wales anytime soon. So you've kind of always got him around, and he's always an option there that won't let you down. Um, but yeah, I think if Joseph Jones can step up again, trying not to bang the Glantav drum a bit there, but um, so, yeah, if Joseph Jones can step up because I know he's a bit of a try scoring machine, then that would just be fantastic. Um, but there's maybe an argument of touch upon the outside centres there. If hypothetically Louis Hennessy or say a Max Llewellyn came in, they are players who featured on the wing. So that's almost maybe like another benefit of either of those two players, if you got them in, that you can say to them, right, we can't maybe guarantee you are going to start, but obviously we've had our winger crisis in the past. We've had difficulties at outside centre before. You're kind of more than likely to get a go every now and then. So yeah, I think I'd support now the Louis Hennessy argument or the Max Llewellyn argument to bring them back home because I think that could then solve a little bit of a question mark around outside centre and then a little bit of wing depth.
Steve, have you got any strong thoughts on back three composition for next season?
Just that I really hope we keep hold of all three fullbacks. Um, I think a lot of people have looked at Matty Young's performance against Stade Francais and thought this guy should be playing more regularly, and they're probably right. He looked really good, really exciting. We probably haven't seen the best of Jacob Beetham yet either. Um, I hope, maybe because of Beetham's versatility and perhaps Matty Young being big enough to use on the wing if we need to, that we're able to give them all three of them enough game time. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of the back three, it is a case of how do you fit them all in? I mean, there's also Cummings, who's the full-back stroke winger, who's been playing well for under 20s. There's a lot of talent there, and bizarrely, I think we've been linked with Ellis Me, which I don't really understand. Um, so yeah, you could see someone leaving just because there are so many good, useful players in the back three stocks at the moment.
Yeah, I think the other thing to add just generally about wingers is that there is quite a good depth across the Welsh game at the moment. And if you looked at all the other sides, really, they've all got a good level of wingers there, and largely Welsh qualified wingers as well. Off the top of my head, they've got Cassende at the Ospreys, and then the Dragons have been using one or two of their South Sea Islanders on the wing at times, but I think everybody's still got very good Welsh qualified stocks. And there's also a couple. Obviously, got Rhys Dammit playing across the bridge, Hathaway as well at Gloucester. So, yeah,
Boshoff.
Boshoff, yes, yeah. So there's no shortage of talented players in that position. So I don't think I think that will help in terms of keeping wages down a little bit as well. There's not going to be too many snooping offering big deals elsewhere, and that if a Cabango and a Stevens, you can re-sign them to sort of relatively sensible contracts, then that's probably worth doing. I would suggest it was good to see Cabango back running on Instagram the other day. He was doing a bit of sprinting, so if we could see any of him on the field before the end of the season, I think that would be great for us and for him. That's kind of it then. That's all of the individual positions. I don't know if anyone's got any burning additions to that in terms of uh, players they'd like to sign in particular or anything like that.
I think as well as looking at it in terms of positions, maybe sort of you also need to look at it in terms of attributes. So, say if like Faletau leaves, people like Ed Byrne or Rory Jennings, who were brought in as experienced older heads, they move on. And, t touch wood, Josh McNally doesn't retire because that would be horrendous. But there might be a need for bringing in and one or two additional older heads just for that leadership role. Um, without even like talking about their position, that might be a strategy we might want to stick to for recruitment.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That yeah, the age profile generally of the squad is still very young. You take those couple of names you mentioned there out, and the average age is still in the mid to low 20s there somewhere. So we are definitely relying on a smallish group of senior heads at the moment. No, that is very true. Right. Any more for any more? All good. I haven't got any other business this week. But obviously, we'll pause the regular podcast for the next few weeks as Cardiff go back on hiatus with the Six Nations finishing up over the next 2 weekends. Got one or two specials potentially in the line. Although I think I say this before every break and I just don't do any. But have actually made progress with one in particular. So keep an eye on your feeds. We'll maybe pop up at random points over the next 2 weeks. But regular programming will resume ahead of that trip to South Africa, and we'll look ahead to that final fixture block as well as back on hopefully what has been a successful-ish final 2 rounds of the Six Nations for Wales and Steve Tandy's men. Until then, Fordey, thank you very much for joining me,
Cheers.
and cheers, Steve,
Cheers.
and thank you very much for listening. We shall catch you soon. Goodbye.